Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night from everybody joining Chile, Munich, Colorado. This is amazing. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our chat. I am so excited to speak with Vivienne Wei, Salesforce COO of Security. She is an inspiring leader who has helped double Salesforce Marketing Cloud revenue, is recognized as a top 100 DE&I leader, and most recently spoke at the United Nations about building inclusive cultures. How cool. This conversation is extra special for me because Vivienne and I became friends 7 years ago when we were both at an alumni event for Harvard Business School. It has been incredible to see her soar since then. I feel lucky that we get to learn from Vivienne today. She has moved up in her career at lightning fast speed while raising a family and actively advocating for women. Today, we're going to talk about self-doubt, motherhood and career, and holding power when you're the only woman in the room. Hi, everyone. I am Shivani Berry, the CEO and founder of Arise Leadership. We offer online leadership programs for women. Our graduates from Fortune 500 companies have gotten a voice at the table and moved up faster in their careers. Our mission is to elevate 1 million women into leadership. That's a big way we're going to create the change that we much need to. And conversations like this help drive that change. Vivienne, thank you so much for joining us. Let's just dive right in. Vivienne, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really honored to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Well, let's just dive right in. I would love to hear from you. There are certain points in our life that have an outsized impact on us. What's an inflection point in your career and how did it impact you?
Yeah, as I think about my career path and in the past, one of the biggest obstacles I ran into was, and basically there was an opportunity for me to step up and apply for a team role, which essentially I had already been like doing the job, but I didn't raise my hand. And one of my peers ended up applying for the role and he got the job and I ended up, reporting to him. And so at the time I was very kind of, I had all kinds of thoughts going through my mind. Oh, this wasn't the right role for me. And I don't know if I wanted the job and etc. But the reality is, if I look back, it was, I had doubt and I didn't necessarily have all the confidence in me to apply when I knew people around me were like, hey, you should really think about applying for that role. So if I look back and I think a lot about, hey, why not putting my name in the hat and applying and having that confidence in myself. And sometimes it took, people around me to do that. But anyways, it was an obstacle for me, a setback. But what actually turned out to be great afterwards was I didn't get the role, but a senior leader in a different part of the company actually reached out for another role that's help. It really helps being the catapult for my career. So it's one of those things where the door is closed, but the window open. And I was very fortunate to have had the opportunity to work for that senior leader.
Amazing. I love that, where it's such a good lesson on even when you hold yourself back once or twice, it doesn't mean sometimes people think it's like, oh, it's done. I can't fix it forever, but that's not true. Like you can, just doing it once, it can change things for you. I would love to dig into more about how did you get here? So maybe you can give us a quick overview of your career and your story.
Yeah, so I started on Wall Street. I was born and raised in China. I went to college here. And after college, I lived in international locations, started on Wall Street, but in London. investment banking, doing mergers, acquisitions. And then I decided after business school, I was like, hey, do I want to take a principal role, or do I want to be an agent, right? Because being professional services, you're continue to be an agent. And I decided I wanted to be more of a principal, kind of have being part of a growth of a business. So that's when I went to eBay to do like M&A and integration. One of the things I really, really enjoyed working on is technology. Partnering with technology leaders to transform our tech stacks to grow our business. And so that led me into a role where I joined Salesforce, started on the infrastructure side, then moving into platform transformation, and most recently on security. And if I think about the common theme, it's like, I'm used to being the odd person in the room that's different from the moment I landed in the United States from China at the age of 18 to going to Wall Street. Never thought I would be in like doing M&A, and to being technology where every day I interact very closely with some of the most brilliant minds. But I speak a very different language, and sometimes our conversations are different, and to enrich conversations and be able to make better decisions.
I love that so much. And I can so relate to that. I mean, I also moved here. I was 6 and then also did M&A and then moved into tech. And so I completely relate to that feeling of being the only woman in the room, being the one who like, it's just like different from others. And I know many of us, especially as women, have experienced being the only person in the room who looks like us. So, and I know you've been in that situation many times, just given the path you've taken, being a
Mhm.
leader in technology. So I'm curious, what's your experience been like as the woman in the room? How do you navigate it? How do you hold power and space in those moments when people doubt you?
Yeah, so a lot of different approaches. One is I really try to hone in on like what value I'm bringing, and gaining the confidence to speak up during those moments. And sometimes it's not the easiest, right? Because I grew up in the culture where, you know, we don't the loudest voice always get the loudest voice to get shot. It's the opposite of the loudest voice gets the grease, right? And so that was a bit of a challenge. But I recognized that over time, like there are ways for me to build allyship outside of the big decision making meetings. And so many decisions actually happen leading up to those meetings where I could actually build allyship and partnership, regardless of what my gender was, and be able to speak up. And then the other thing I recognize is if there's another woman in the room, we kind of try to build bond outside of it to be the amplifier for each other. And then lastly, I also seek out male allies, like people that I really share similar values with and partner very closely with. And I recognize, like, at the end of the day, it's really, we're all humans. And if we're being vulnerable, want to do what's best for the business, and are willing to share and challenge other's thoughts, like that's actually served me really well by listening and being open to other ideas, and to basically build stronger points of view before I bring ideas into the room.
I love that. And so many practical tips around it. I'm curious, like, how do you build that allyship? What do you say in those moments? Or how do you how do you get people to advocate for you?
Yeah, so it's a combination of things. I usually think about how I can serve others and how I can partner, understand what people's like objectives and their perspectives are. Because in thinking through that, it actually helps me build a broader perspective. And then also offer my value proposition of, hey, here's how I think about the problem. And it may be a little bit different from how others are thinking. And here's the reasons why, and explaining that. And I think others actually really appreciate hearing those perspectives. So in having those dialogues, you kind of build that common bond. through relationships, because a lot of, business is about relationships and the building logic, but the two come hand in hand. And I think lastly, I remember when I first got into infrastructure, I had never done infrastructure before, right? Cloud infrastructure. And there was a lot of like terminology that I didn't understand. But then I recognized like I was there to help bring the perspective of like financial planning and making capital allocations. So through that, I actually just openly talked to one of my partners and was like, I don't understand this area at all. Can you help me and dumb it down for me? And the person was so willing and open to share that. And when just me vulnerably like open up and share that with him, he actually was very willingly helpful to me. So that just went a long way. And I think a lot about, hey, what helps me to get here? Like I need to give back and do the same thing for others, because it's not always easy, but everyone's learning, and we're in the technology world. If you're not learning, you become obsolete.
I love that so much, especially that example of like going to someone and being like, I don't know this. Can you help me? I think so often we get caught up in our own heads and we're like, well, they're going to think we're stupid, or, they're not going to respect us. Did you do anything leading up to that conversation that helped them be more receptive? Or maybe even in that moment that helped them be more receptive to you just saying like, hey, I don't know this, can you help me? Or is it just like, just taking that chance and being like upfront about it is like what really helps you like get that support and that respect?
Yeah, it's being the Asian person, you always do your homework in advance and try to go through all the technical documents, right? So I did a lot of that. And then I was like, here's what those terminologies, I read this glossary, I read this other document, but here are the critical questions I still don't understand. Help me. So it showed a combination of like efforts, but also vulnerability, which I think my partner really appreciated. And he's like, yeah, if you didn't work here before, you wouldn't be able to understand the context. And it requires somebody to explain it, which made me feel much better. But I
That's
think,
amazing.
yeah, it just took that kind of courage to ask the question, which opened up the window for partnership and for that collaboration and building deeper bonds.
Yeah, definitely. And I love the how you call out the importance of doing the prep work. You're like, I'd gone through it, I knew what I could know. And so that person respects that, and you're able to come in and ask intelligent questions instead of just being like, oh, like I didn't even try. So that resonates a lot. Since we're having really open conversations right now, I would love to talk to you about something that is on many of our minds, but we don't get to talk about openly. That is about like integrating career and motherhood. And I know, you have two kids, and you've even written a book around like labor force and kind of like, and so I'd love to hear from you, like, what was your experience like navigating the transition to motherhood, especially after having your second child?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was actually during having my first child, I felt like my identity was in question, because I looked up around in investment banking, there were very few women with children at the managing director level. I mean, I couldn't really think of any. And then then you have super successful women who don't have families, right? Um, so there was a lot of doubt about, hey, can I actually have a career and a family? But before I came to the United States, it was never a question, because my mom was an entrepreneur, was founding member of a company, and just kind of raised me while having a career and building up this company. And so, I went on to like interview senior executives actually through the HBS network to understand a bit more of, hey, like how did they make it? They had both a career and a family, to kind of get answers for myself. And what I learned was, wow, in the system, like women just don't always get a lot of support, right? In technology now, we have more, maternity leave, et cetera. to help transition. And then also culturally at the company, it's more receptive. But at the time, I think for me, it was like this big question of, hey, if I'm going to have a first kid, am I going to take a step back and never going to be able to grow my career? And over time, as I talk to different people and different leaders, and also selecting a company where women and our knowledge are truly cherished, and our pursuit of career are encouraged and are supported, that made a huge difference for me. So, I did that for myself during the first maternity leave, during the first, when I was pregnant with the first kid. And then when I had my second child, things just got, much busier. But it was also during that time when I was like, hey, I had all this knowledge. I need to actually write it down for others so that people can learn, from, from my learnings, and they can take it and use that strategy to help them navigate the transition to motherhood while still pursuing a career.
I love that. It is incredibly empowering to see women ahead who've been really successful and also have a family. Is I've had a similar experience to you. I've had a hard time as I was like younger in my career, um, finding leaders, women leaders who had kids also, and seeing like what could life look like that. And so I think you're such a beautiful example of like someone who does have that really robust, successful career, but also is really thoughtful around family life. And so that was part of the reason I was like very excited to get to talk to you here on top of like everything else that you've like just achieved, which has been amazing. And I think how you're talking about that role model, it's so important. And that identity shift that you just talked about, like I went through that too. And now talking to other moms, I realize I'm not alone in that. And I wish like we would have more of those conversations around it. So, I mean, I have like so many questions for you right now floating through my head around like all of this. So maybe I'm just gonna start peppering with some questions and we can like take it from there. What does your day-to-day look like? Like just kind of like walking us through like is there any guidelines you follow or like typical day-to-day structure looks like kind of how you like work and like spend time with family, yourself, errands, whatever else.
Yeah, this is something over time I've learned to kind of set boundaries and set very specific time blocks in my calendar. So in the morning, like my partner and I get the kids ready and one of us like sends them off, and then I generally like take some time to read and get ready for the day, and go into the meetings. I didn't used to take, I have to admit, during COVID, I did not take as good care and like try to set a time aside like time blocks, because it was just like going from meetings to meetings to meetings. And then I recognized like, I would find myself starting from like 8 a.m. till like 6 p.m. nonstop in front of the computer, locked up in the room. And then one day my partner's like, hey, you need to actually show up. I'm glad he actually, had that conversation with me. I was like, you're right, because the work will never stop. So I realized like, hey, I actually had to set aside time for like lunch, a quick lunch break. And then in the afternoon, like 15-20 minutes to go and pick up my kids from the bus stop, and like actually helping to get some walk around the neighborhood as well, to like take a step back and out. And then in the evening, we take turns to prep for dinner. But usually I also log on to the computer like late at night just to finish up some of the things that I wasn't able to finish. But yeah, it's a combination of constantly evolving based on the kids' activities and their age, and also the support system I have to come up with a system.
Yeah, that's so helpful to hear the breakdown of it. And I can totally relate to like just getting so sucked into work and then also the epiphany that like, yeah, there are always going to be work and around it. So it's helpful to hear both like how you do it now. When you started saying like, oh, I read in the beginning, I was like, oh, wow, I'm so impressed. Like, I need to do that too. And then it's helpful that you were like, okay, but I wasn't always like that. And it's evolving and it's in seasons. So I think around that actually, how do when you are in a more demanding season at work,
Mhm.
how does your partner or support system evolve or step in to support you in that?
Yeah, I actually have a set of support, whether it's from the family members, or whether it's people in the neighborhood whose children are around the same age as mine, and we take turns to do pick up or drop off, or taking them to activities, or like babysitters. I basically, and there's also all these things we need to do around the house, right? And I find kind of support. And it's interesting because I thought a lot about, well, you mentioned during my transition, I recognize a lot of women decide to take a step, to go out of their career, like take 2 years or so, which is a great, like you should choose that if that is what you want. But I actually built a financial model, being a financial being from finance, like an NPV analysis of, hey, this is what it costs to build up all the support systems and having the sitters, and somebody to order dinner instead of cooking myself, and instead I save up a bunch of time that I can invest into my relationships and into my family. So those trade-offs that I've done, like I actually built it into a model. And so going back to your point, like your question, like it really is kind of slotting in the time and the resources I need to accommodate the spike I have at work so that I can do both. And it's never a perfect formula, but I've found like certain times when I know this is going to be a crunch for the next 2 weeks and I'm just going to have to like get additional help, and these are the staff or the support system I have, and I'm gonna try to lean into that, so that I can lean into work in the meantime, for a short period of time. That's what's actually helps me do the balance.
I love that. I love how structured you are in that approach. That financial model, so good. And but you're right. Like you have to. I love that you're being so intentional about like and valuing your time and like it's not just a financial input, but it's also like the time that you could spend with in relationships. There's a value associated with it, and I think that's such a good lesson around it. I like yeah. There's also a lot of things I'll outsource. So like I'd rather like right now DoorDash packages is my favorite because it's like I don't have to go drop it off. And I was like, I'd rather just like spend time at home with my daughter. And
Yes.
so yeah, completely
Yeah,
resonate.
and not feeling bad about it, right? Because
Yeah.
there are so many opinions, for women, like, oh, you breastfeed, you don't breastfeed, it's good or bad. Should women work? Should women not work? Should you cook? Should you not cook? Like, there's all these societal opinions about what we should do, and I've kind of just learn to be okay with, hey, these are the choices I've decided to make, and because that's how I've chosen to prioritize for my family, for our overall like happiness, and as well as balancing the career trajectory.
Yeah. I love that. And actually, on that note, I have a question with you around that guilt and those expectations imposed by people is so real, whether it's coming from our friends, family, work, society in general, people that don't even know you are judging you. And so let's talk about like a particular subgroup, our colleagues. And so how do you set expectations with your colleagues regarding family commitments? I know often, I felt, others I've heard have felt like nervous telling them like, "Oh, I have a pickup," or "Sorry, I have a sick kid at home," or whatever for whatever thing because of
Yeah.
fear of judgment or maybe even letting our colleagues down. We want to make sure we're like showing up for them too. So, how do you set expectations and like how do you work through any discomfort you have when doing so if you have discomfort around it?
Yeah, I've been actually somewhat fortunate that I've always had very supportive managers and male managers who took on like family responsibilities, and they've always been open, this was when I was more junior. They were always open with like pick up and drop off. At the time, for me, it was like a shocking thing to experience, because I was like, well, how do you feel so comfortable just doing that, right? And then as I've grown, I recognize, like, actually we as leaders have to be open and be very specific and transparent with what we have to work on with the family, and create that culture of, well, this is the time I need to go and pick up my kids, and I share that with my team. And at Salesforce, we do this thing called the team agreement, where I actually would work with my team to like outline, hey, here are the hours where, I have some constraints, whether it's childcare responsibilities or other responsibilities, right? Because we also have elderly parents and other, medical requirements. And each person's situation is different. And this is where I think by having those conversations, whether it's, different time zones, different responsibilities, you create the boundaries and create some shared common hours. That way you're not disappointing anybody because you've already set expectations with others up front very clearly so that people know what to expect. And then, there's also the flexibility that we create with one another that it allows us to have both integrate life with work.
I love that. I think that's such a good, important call out about setting those expectations up front. So when those moments do arise in the moment, you're not just like last minute, you're like, oh, sorry, I can't come to this meeting, or I can't get this work done based on this timeline. Like in advance, people know, and then you can plan for it. Or even if there's a last minute thing, I'd imagine because you set those expectations early on, it's not a surprise that you can't do it. It's not
Right.
like I think like a big part of being a good colleague is reliability. And at least those expectations help like set the expectation. Like, yeah, I told you from before, I probably wouldn't be able to get to this.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. I think also a lot about just kind of workplace culture, right? We're as women, we're faced with, do we have a supportive culture? I think by you sharing some of the constraints, it actually gives you the opportunity to learn about that culture and whether you'll have a more successful future long term because of the culture that it represents.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's so important. And so you just being so aware of that as you go into like your next like workplace around it. As we're talking about work setups, one question I have for you is about getting more senior in your career and how does that impact the systems you have in place for family, household? I think especially because often many women wonder, how will my life change, or what are the trade-offs I'm going to have to make when I get more senior? And so just to help give people visibility into that, how have the household operational systems changed or evolved as you started hitting the director, VP level that were maybe different from what you had when you were more junior in your career? And I'm curious, like, why were these new systems required?
Yeah. So it's a combination of things. I definitely think there is a bit of an always on mentality, as in like I'm always thinking about there are always things about work that I'm thinking about. So it takes up the mental space. Does it mean necessarily I have to sit in front of a computer crunching a model? Not always, right? So I think what it means is I when I am away from my computer, I need to like mentally set aside kind of that mental bandwidth to be present with the family or to be thinking about work. These two things, like the boundaries I have to set pretty clearly. And then the other thing I've learned, I've observed is I actually have a bit more control over my schedule for certain things, as in like the day-to-day rhythms. I'm able to like set aside that time a bit better. It's a little bit counterintuitive because I realize like there are certain times where I can work with my colleagues to kind of say, oh, this is not a good time for me to meet. But then I also realize like late at night, sometimes I have to like lean in more and do that work I wasn't able to do during the day. So it's a bit of, a bit more control during the day, if needed, but certainly if there's something really urgent, I recognize like, hey, having a supportive partner and having that support system around me where I can call a neighbor down the street and be like, hey, can my kids come over and play for a couple hours because I have this urgent last minute deadline that just came up. That has actually really allowed me to do both.
I love that. So important. I mean, so many good insights here. So I'm so grateful to you for like opening up and sharing all this. One last question on this, and then we'll like wrap up with the final question is uh, when one thing you talked about is like kind of preserving your mental energy. And how do you, I think I have this habit of always being on similar to you.
Yeah,
And so when I'm with my family or like doing other stuff, I'm just like thinking about like my to-do list is running through my mind a lot with like family stuff like, oh, do we have enough diapers and groceries and all this stuff? And that happens even with having like this amazing partner, like sounds like kind of like even for you, like, but even then there's always this to-do list running through our minds. And
yeah,
then also the work to-do list, like, oh, I need to email this person or like having an idea about this new project that you're doing.
yeah,
How do you manage that in the moment of like so you can be like fully present with your kids?
yeah. I think I realized like by putting the to-do list from my mind onto a piece of paper, just that action really helps. And then I get so much joy from like ticking it off. And I've actually learned to like put sticker notes, little sticker notes all over like a whiteboard. And there's different like, there's the family stuff I need to do, which is color coded like orange. And then there's the pink slips that are for work, like what I have to do. Um, and the best part is I actually get a lot of joy for like tearing those things off on the wall. So that helps, right? By putting it on paper, then I'm like, okay, I actually don't have to think about it because I already have this plan, which is really helpful. And then, yeah, I think that that system is something I've tried and that's worked very well. And then the other one is, just kind of being really intentional with children, they when they are with you, and especially I notice I have an 8-year-old that they try to have conversations with you. When I was not when I didn't respond, like she picks up on it and she actually calls me out. So which actually was an intentional reminder, right? Like, hey, if I'm there, I should just have a conversation, be engaged, and take the moment to like learn about her. So I try to like force my mind away from work, just to be like super present. But she also called me out. So
I love it. I love that she's calling you out on it. We all need your 8-year-old to like call us out on this. Be like, be present. It's so good. And final question for you. We could seriously go on for hours talking about this, but final question for you. What's a piece of career advice that you'd share with us? Whether it's like related to like career mom life or just kind of moving up or just like lessons learned along the way. What's a piece of career advice?
yeah, I would say if there's somebody you want to learn from and have admired, just reach out and create that connection and build a relationship and try to learn from the person. I think whether it's within your company or outside of the company to learn some best practices, it's pretty amazing. This is one of the things I love about tech. Like you just there's so much to learn and so many different perspectives, just even working on the same product, but in different companies, like you learn so much. And so just having that reaching out to people. And sometimes I think about, oh, would the person say no? But the worst thing that happens is a no. So what? Right? So continue to create that bond and create that network and connection.
I really love that. I remember when I reached out to you asking you to be a guest here. Uh, I was really nervous. I was like, oh, maybe she'll say no. She's probably so busy. But I also had to remind myself, it's fine. Like if she says no, it's not a big deal. I might as well. For me, I live by like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I was like, let me just ask her. And you did. And you've been so amazing and gracious and just like so many wisdom bombs. So Vivienne, thank you again for joining us. This has been incredible and just like so relatable, but also so many insights into things that we're struggling with the day to day. So I really, really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Amazing. Thank you all for joining us. I love all the shares that you've had in the chat. If you want to dive into more of these topics and really develop these skills yourself, come join us in Arise Leadership Accelerator. It's a 6-week leadership program for women, all online. That starts in a few weeks. We're going to drop the application link in the chat. You get to learn with just an incredible group of high caliber, low ego women from Google, Salesforce, Uber, really just like the best companies from around the world. And this has just been amazing. We will share out the recording. Wow, Vivienne, you're getting so much love in the chat. This is like really just like really resonating with people. So thank you again. This has been amazing. No surprise. I'm like so grateful for you for your time and just insights around this. And thank you again, everyone. Take care. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.